So how many of you have ever slept with your mobile device? I know that sounds completely wrong, but I'm seeing about half of you put your hands up. How many of you are sleeping with your mobile device right now? This is my BlackBerry from about 2005, and there was something about that device that was really cool. It was long before the iPhone. It was something that I became really attached to it. It was something that I used not just to communicate, but it was also a big part of my life in that I used it as my alarm clock. So I actually literally slept with it many nights on my chest in both, so that it had a loud ring to wake me up in the morning when I was on the road, but I also had it set on vibrate mode just in case. So I had that physical reaction to it as well. And then things changed in 2000 and whatever it was when I got my first iPhone. I still have this iPhone at home, even though it's really not used as anything more than a really low-level iPod Touch now. We grow really connected to our devices, and it's very natural for us to feel like we are connected with them and they're a big part of our lives. And when we design, we tend to think of things of these things almost as an extension of us. Does anybody have this many devices? No? This is actually yes, in the back, excellent. I think this is not me. I still have probably every laptop that I've ever owned. I don't think I've ever gotten rid of any one of them. I have a 486 laptop, an Acer model from probably 1999. That was my first laptop. I still have all of these things. I've kept them all. And there's something about devices that attracts us to them. So it's very easy when we're designing, when we're designing, to be thinking about devices and different form factors. And that's part of what has resulted in this propensity to think about responsive design. And what I'd like to talk to you about today is kind of thinking beyond the device as we're designing. So this is me. Oh, that's not me. This is actually kind of a misleading slide. That's definitely not me. That's my name, though. I'm Derek Featherstone. I'm Feather on Twitter. And I'm kind of obsessed with devices, but I want to move beyond that. And I think that's something that we can all certainly do, or try to do. Now, the question that we used to ask as designers was, what resolutions do we design for? And as we've started to look at things with responsive designs, we've started to say we need to just not think about specific resolutions. The answer always used to be, when I first started designing for the web, it was 640 by 480. That's what you design for, 640 by 480, because that was the lowest common denominator. And then it moved to 800 by 600, and from there it moved up to 1024 by 768. And now we're in a scenario where we have so many different devices, so many different resolutions to cater for, we can't really just design for specific resolutions anymore. So this is our website, Simply Accessible. So we do a lot of accessibility consulting, which is really just really user experience work that is targeted with very specific groups of people. So this is what our site looks like on an iPhone. This is what it looks like on an iPad in landscape mode, on an iPad on portrait mode. We've created a design that just kind of works in different scenarios, right? So it works in landscape mode, it works in portrait mode, it works on a smaller device. And typically what we do for these responsive designs is we scale them down so that when we have a narrow viewport, instead of having multiple columns of content, we shrink it down and we make it so that it's a single column. It's pretty straightforward stuff. We do this with media queries and with JavaScript to cater for browsers that don't deal well with media queries. So the question used to be, what resolutions do we design for? But the important question that good designers are asking now is, what resolution ranges do we design for? And the only answer for this question is all of them, right? The only resolution ranges that we can design for are all of them. Now, we've decided that we're going to do something so that we have, we have a specific display when we're displaying less than 300 pixels wide, and then another display when we're between 300 and 800, and then between 800 and 1200, and then 1200 and beyond. We have specific ranges that we're catering for and that we're optimizing for. And that's part of what responsive design is all about. But we need to take a look and go a little bit further with this. It has an impact not just on the technical side and on the design side, but it also has an impact on something like copy. So take a look at this. This is a blog. Interesting stuff there. There's some analytics research there. And this is what it looks like on the mobile theme. And if you look here, so you can see, and this is fairly typical, we see a mobile theme switcher. The mobile theme is on. I want you to take a look at the copy that's here. To receive all of these useful resources, simply complete the form to the right. Well, there is no right, right? There is no right. When you turn the mobile theme off, then we have a right-hand column. But it just doesn't exist, right, in that mobile view. So we need to think about it not just as a design exercise in terms of a technical implementation, but we have to think about what it means for our content. It's a critical piece. Understanding that form, and really look at the placement, the form to the right. I mean, it's not even really to the right. It's up at the top. So I mean, there's other things going on there with that copy. But these are the kinds of things that we want to take into account when we're looking at responsive designs. Now, I want to take a look at design in context, and this is why I think we need to go beyond the device. The device is one part of understanding the context of use for somebody. So what defines context? We've been thinking about this for a while in some of the designs that we have been building and trying out with our clients. And we've kind of come up with a few different things, and you can do lots of different research on this. We went and did lots of different searches to find out what actually defines context. Some of the things are time, location, proximity to other people, the device that you're using, the form factor. To undertake at any given time, what your interests are, and even things like the interaction model that you're using. So let's take a look at what this means. This diagram back here is actually one of the very first things that I did when I started to realize that we need to change what we're doing a little bit with content. So we built, I'm from Ottawa, Canada, and we have a group there that we created a UX camp. So it's a user experience camp, basically a really inexpensive one-day conference for people. And we built the site for UX camp. And we started to think there was some really, it's a fairly standard site in that it has a specific job to do. It needs to sell tickets. We still charged money for it so that we didn't run at a loss. We wanted to encourage community things. We had lots of different things happening in there, pretty straightforward navigation, who our sponsors are. But we had one main call to action leading up to the event. And that main call to action was this. On Sunday, November 27th at University of Ottawa, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., go and register now, right? Register right now. We started to think about it as we were getting closer to the date. Oh, what happens if we sell out? The last thing we want to do is have people go to this site, see a button that says register now, click on it, and then get to a page that says, sorry, we're sold out. That just doesn't make any sense, right? It really doesn't make sense. And then when we get to event day, we don't want to still have the register. If we didn't sell out, when we get to the event day, we don't want to have the button say register now. So we made a small change so that we had a switch that we could flip that said use the register now header, or the event's full, it's after the event, it's the day of the event. To receive updates about the next UX camp, now subscribe. And so a tiny little change in what action we want people to take in that area was pretty straightforward. And then it kind of got us thinking a little bit more as we were building out the rest of the site, what we could do. And so we built the site, we set it up, it was responsive, it fit well on other devices. So even when we get to that main page on a mobile screen, that email subscription form was really right close to the top. And then we started to think, what are we going to do for people on a mobile so that when they check the schedule, we wanted to have a really nicely formatted mobile schedule. So we started to put that together. And as we were putting this together, saying, okay, well, we've got the schedule, we've got the event details, we've got access to everything, This was a really nice formatted schedule that we thought, well, we'll show this to any mobile device. Anything that's less than 800 pixels wide, we're going to show it to that. To a 300 pixel wide device, we're going to show it slightly differently. It'll be a little bit narrower. The layout might change slightly. And then we looked at this page, and we looked at it, and we thought, you know, this isn't something that should just be presented to somebody that's on a mobile device. There's absolutely no reason when you go to the UX Camp Ottawa website on the day of the event for you to see all of the copy that's selling the conference. There's absolutely no reason for it. Why? Because they're already there. It's the day of the event. So we looked at this and we said, well, let's just set this up so that at midnight on the day of the event, so as soon as it turns midnight, automatically throw a switch so that no matter who you are, you get this on a mobile device, on a desktop device, anywhere else. It doesn't matter. It's the day of the event. This is the most important thing. So we've got the most important things here. Because on the day of the event, the only thing that really matters is the schedule. So we had that available, and we just flipped a switch in WordPress. We built this site in WordPress and said, hey, let's set up some code. It wasn't a redirect. It wasn't like uxcamp.com or uxottawa.ca/schedule. We just took over the whole homepage because that was the appropriate thing to do. If you went to the main page on that day, you got the schedule. The schedule was the most important thing. And then we thought, what else is important to us on the day of the event? Well, it was also all the sharing. We wanted to encourage the sharing, so we built in the Twitter icon and the Facebook and the Flickr icon, put those fairly prominently up in the top right corner. We also wanted to make sure that we continued to recognize the sponsors of the event, but in a slightly different way. Right? In a slightly different way. We didn't want to get in the way of the schedule, but we still wanted them recognized. So instead of having them all displayed at once, we turned them into something that rotated. So it was a rotating set of sponsor logos that kept going through the bottom of the page. They were always there. And then the last thing we did was we thought, well, if we're kind of co-opting the homepage and taking it over completely, what if somebody's looking for a blog post that they saw that had details of a really great place to get lunch or something like that? So we still built in the ability to get back to the full site. So we had this capability available to us. We made it so that it looked really good on a narrower viewport as well. Still pretty straightforward. We even included the iCal feed in the top there that basically said, go download the whole schedule, subscribe to it, any changes will get picked up here. Now, we looked at this and we said, it completely makes sense, but I don't know why we don't do this. I don't know why we don't do this. Every single conference website that I go to, when I'm looking, it always shows the main page, right? Even on, there was a conference I spoke at in last October, and I was going there and I was speaking there, and I hit the schedule page, and all it gave me was day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. I then had to go and choose day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. Well, didn't they already know what day it was? Right? We know what day it is. So let's just bring up that day by default. Right? Why don't we do these things? Sometimes because we're rushed and we're in a hurry and we don't think of them. But these are the kinds of things that I think can make a huge difference. We actually set this up to look at the type of content over time. And this was kind of my initial sketch. And then we turned it into this. We created it as a context map. It just kind of maps what content takes priority or emphasis over time. So photos leading up to the event aren't really all that important because there's no photos, right? So they don't really have any importance, but they grow in importance during the event, and then they have an importance after the event because we want to attract attention to the event on an ongoing basis. Speaker information, relatively important, probably not as important during the event because everybody's there anyway. And then maybe more important slightly after. Tweets, not as important leading up to the event, but really important at the event because of the sharing aspect of it. And then maybe it kind of trails off a little bit. The schedule, the logistics, venue, selling, registration. The schedule, completely unimportant until we get closer to the event. Absolutely critically important on the event day. And then afterwards, it doesn't really matter at all. So it fades back into out of prominence. And then logistics, the selling, that's really, really important leading up to the event, but at the event, there's really only a few things that are important there, and then it drops off. So we kind of looked at this and said, how does this help? How does content priority change with respect to time? How does that influence how we design? How does that influence what we create, how we program this? And we looked at it and said, this is just one aspect of context. What about location? We actually took it a step further and said, we had this schedule. We said, great, if we're leading up to the event, if we're on the leading up to the event, we don't have the schedule showing, but on the day of the event, we turn it into the schedule. The schedule becomes the homepage. Well, we had 3 different pieces of information on there: the schedule, the event details, and the full site. Now, the event details was all the instructions on how to get there. So what we actually did was took it a step further and broke the time down a little bit more. So that if you were, say, at about 8:30, it started at 9 o'clock, so I think it was 8:45. If it was 8:45 and until 4 p.m. or whatever it was, then the schedule showed by default. But if it was 8 o'clock in the morning, then we showed the event details on how to get there by default. We showed that tab of content rather than the schedule. We even took it a step further and geolocated. So if you allowed us to geolocate you within your browser or on your device, if we saw that you were already in the building or within 200 meters of the main auditorium, then we showed you the schedule rather than the event details on how to actually get there. One thing that I hate about geolocation is these really, really ugly boxes. We want to use your location. I usually want to know why. And like, why do you want to use my location? I'm not sure if I trust this. So I think this is a limitation of the user agents that we're using right now. But that's something that will likely be conquered over time. Excuse me. So when we got to that scenario, we did that geolocation to say, let's show this event details tab by default so that it shows parking information, it shows the bus routes to get there, all of that information that someone is more likely to need depending on where they are. We started to look at it a bit further when we were thinking about the other copy, and this is something that we hope to kind of build in next year. There's all kinds of other questions that have to do with location, right? Which rooms are we using? What entrance should I use? What building is the event in? If you're coming from out of town, what hotels? Can you give me information on car rental? All of these things. Can I walk there? What's the nearest public transit stop? Where can I park? Can I get into the facility with my wheelchair? Right? These are all questions that are location-based, pieces of information that people want to know. So we took a look at this and said, okay, well, this is where the event is. How do we map the importance of this content out? So we created another context map, the priority of content with respect to location. So depending on where you are, different pieces of information mean more to you, right? They mean more to you. So if you're in the building, you're more likely to be interested in what room things are happening in. If you're in the building, you're more likely to be interested in a building map, right, than you are airport information. If you're within the city, you might be more interested in public transit routes to get there, or bike routes to get there, or walking directions if you're even closer, if you're within a block or a certain radius. If you're far away, what can you give me the airport information? Can you give me car rental information, hotel information? Now, this is not foolproof, right? I could be from Ottawa. Well, I am from Ottawa. But I could be here giving a presentation about it and pull up the site, and it might ask me to use my location and then assume that I need the airport information even when I don't really need it. So we didn't say, if you're far away, you can't get the building map or the room information. It's just that we presented the most likely stuff that you might need first. So if you were farther away, we presented the airport information, all that traveling to the city information as a content block that appeared first. And it kind of drilled down. If you were in the building, we showed all that information first and then moved the airport and travel information to the bottom, right? It's not that it's not there, it's just that it's given different weight in terms of the source order. So that was kind of our the second big, not really revelation, but the things that we started to look at. The content priority changes with respect to location. We wanted to go further though, and this is not necessarily about that website, but once we started seeing these patterns emerge, we thought, well, what else can we do here? Now, this is another one of our sites. I do quite a bit of speaking. I used to be a high school teacher, so I've got a lot of experience speaking, and I like helping people become better speakers. This is a site that I created to write about speaking. It's called Seize the Room. And one of the things, this is on my Mac, and I'm an accessibility person. I really, really am. I love accessibility and understanding how to make things better for people with disabilities. One of the functions that we have in the Mac operating system is the ability to highlight text and to say, make it, speak it to me. So I can highlight a paragraph and I can click on speech and then say, start speaking that to me. Now that's useful for somebody that has low vision. They may be zoomed in on the interface. So if you're a Mac user, you can zoom in on the interface, just hold down the control key and then scroll in and scroll out, and you'll be able to zoom the entire interface or a portion of it. And that makes it very difficult for somebody that has low vision. It's difficult for them to read long passages of text. So a typical behavior for somebody that has low vision is to zoom in on the interface, zoom in on the screen, highlight some text once they've oriented themselves and realize that this is text that I actually want to read, rather than straining their eyes to read it and scrolling across. What they'll actually do in many cases is to highlight the text and say, just read this to me, so they can give their eyes a rest. One of the problems that people with low vision have is just, it's painful to read sometimes because of eye strain. It could be the brightness, it could be the color scheme, it could be a lot of different things. So this is a scenario here where we've got this speech capability. Now I want to show you a little movie clip of this interface. So this is the interface, and I'm actually zoomed in here on my MacBook. So I'm zoomed in, and you can see that's the entire screen. I'm not sure how well you can see the outline, but this is the entire screen. And I've got things blown up probably to about 10 times their regular size, 10 or 12 times their regular size. So I want you to watch what happens. This is a movie, and forgive me because it got a little bit shaky. Watch what happens when I try to invoke that speech functionality. So I'm going to highlight that entire paragraph. I'm going to right-click. I go down to speech, and what happens? I have to very carefully move over until I get to the submenu that allows me to start speaking and stop speaking. Now this makes absolutely no sense to me, because at the operating system level, we know that we are zoomed in. So if we're zoomed in, and this goes true for mobile as well, when we're dealing with small viewports and small pieces of the screen that we're looking at once, it's a much more efficient layout to have things in a single vertical stack. Right? You know that from working on your mobile phones. When you're filling out forms, a single vertical stack works quite well. So why is it that we don't have the design be something like this? So that when we're zoomed in, we know this, right? We're on the operating system. These are computers. These are things that people can actually calculate. Yes, the user is zoomed in right now, so let's change the rendering of the menu so that we don't have to go all the way off to the side. And just bring it down right below, so that instead of being over, we just move straight down, and it's within the field of view. Right? So in this case, it's not really, not really looking at the way that content changes, but we're actually changing the way that the display changes relative to the capabilities of the user. Things that they're telling you, they're zoomed in right now, so why aren't we changing the way that this thing behaves? Right? Why aren't we changing the way that it is displayed? This is another one, and I think this one is one of my favorites because it's me. But this, I don't want to look at this anymore. This is a screencast that we did about images and putting images in context and understanding what alternative text and image needs. And you can't just look at an image and say, it needs this alt text. You have to look at the image and what its function is and what its purpose is and understand it in context to be able to say, this is the appropriate alt text for this. And so we put together a screencast and published it on YouTube. And we looked at this and said, there's different things that we could do with this. One of them, and I know you can just see it down here, one of the things we always do, we always transcribe the videos. Even though there's captioning on, we always have the transcript available. I talked about this in my accessibility workshop yesterday. We always have the transcript available because a screen reader user, even though captions and transcripts are primarily designed for people that can't hear so that they have an alternative to the audio, we always provide the transcripts because even though the captions deal with people that are hearing impaired, the transcript is useful for somebody that's using a screen reader because they can take in content much faster by listening to their screen reader than they could by listening to me talk for 7 minutes and 35 seconds. Right? They could go through that same content probably in about 2 minutes and 50 seconds or 3 minutes just because their screen reader reads it faster. It also means that they can listen to it in the screen reader voice that they're used to rather than my voice, which they may not be used to. Right? How many people, so when you find transcripts available, do you just go and read those instead of actually watching the movies? And it's much quicker, right? You can skim through, you can find the things that you want, right? That's part of understanding what people want to do with these things and understanding their context. Now, looking at this, there's things that bother me. I hate going to YouTube and turning on captions 3 times in a row and having YouTube not remember that I've just turned captions on 3 times in a row, and then maybe automatically turning on captions for me for the next 3 movies that I go to. Right? There are behaviors that we take as users that could be easily remembered and then followed up on by changing the interface and the way that the functionality behaves just because of the things that we've actually expressed. Our actions express intent and desires. So if I turn on captioning 3 times in a row, why doesn't YouTube remember that and just automatically start turning them on? Even yesterday, I was doing another screen, not a screencast, but a capture of a video, and it drove me nuts that I had to keep going and turning on HD. Right? The default setting is 360p. Why can't it remember that I've turned it to 720p for the last 3 movies that I've watched? It makes no sense to me that we're not doing those things. The other side of this, and I know this happens, and I know it won't happen to anybody in here, but when I'm at a conference, I would really like to be able to do something with my computer that I can say, like I can with my iPhone, go into silent mode. So if I was at a conference, and maybe it's specific, right? I don't know if I had a resource page that I was giving to you right now. I really should have put together a resource page. If I gave you a resource page that had a whole bunch of different movies on it, if I could build that resource page to include an understanding of time and geolocation so that if it sees that you're in here right now and it's during the time of the conference, that instead of launching a YouTube video without the captioning on and the volume up, that it automatically said, oh, that person's at this conference right now. I'm going to launch it so that it's muted and turns on captions by default. Because I'm just thinking of you, right? You don't want to have those things. You don't want to play that video because you're there and you're thinking, oh, well, I want to see this video, and then it starts blaring out of your computers, right? We could protect people from themselves. So what kinds of things can we do based on or what kind of design changes or functional changes can we make based on the activities that they're performing, right? What activities are they performing? Where are they? What are they likely to be doing right now? We can't make it. It's not foolproof, right? It's not foolproof. What about this one? I love this one. This happens all the time. This is a search listing, a set of search results from an airline search. I was looking to take a flight from Denver back to Ottawa after a conference. And I looked at this and I thought, this is kind of cool. I've got my typical, my sorting and my filtering up in the top right. Right now, I'm sorted by price. And I've got the option to switch to departure time and shortest flight. I've got my price here. It's very prominent. It's very obvious. And I can go through that, and I can say, make my decision based on price. But if I change and say that I want to sort based on departure time, why is it that departure time is buried in the same way that it was buried before? It's not that you can't get at the departure time, but why isn't it up top? Why isn't it bubbling to the top as an important piece of content? Somebody has physically said, departure time is really important to me. So why didn't that information make it up into here somewhere? Right? And I know why. I'm not going to say why. We all know why these things happen. If I switch to shortest flight and say duration is most important to me, why is it that duration is still buried as the 6th piece of information in that block? Price is almost always important, so I totally get that price is always there up at the top. But why aren't some of those other pieces of content making their way up to the top? Right? So these are the kinds of things where we're looking at people's interests. What are they actually interested in, and how can we change the display based on what they're looking at? So I hope all of this makes sense. I think it's really a question of looking at what defines context. And we've really only kind of begun to explore this. Things like time, location, proximity, device, state of mind, capabilities, activities, interests, interaction. And once we started exploring this, we started seeing it everywhere. Does anybody play like Words with Friends or Scramble with Friends or anything like that? Scramble with Friends game is kind of interesting because you can tap on the letters or you can drag on the letters. And the game actually changes its interface based on whether or not you're dragging a word or you're tapping a word. And I think that's the kind of thing that we want to start to do and create designs that respond to all of the clues that we actually have available to us. So with that, I'll say thank you very much again. I'm Derek Featherstone. I'm Feather on Twitter. Thank you.